So hello everyone. Today is Sunday, October 13th. And guess what's going on? I'm showing you the entrance of my observation hive. And I'm also showing you what's going on my property here. The landscape has gone to sleep. The flowers are not providing nectar or pollen anymore. They've dwindled down to almost nothing. So what happens? Well, we have a huge forest of foragers flying around. And what I'm showing you in this video is something that for a lot of beekeepers is very controversial. And I'm going to explain some of my logic behind why I think it's okay to create a robbing station well away from your bee yard and allow bees to clean up honey frames. And it's also where you can place sugar syrup this time of year, because where I live in the northeastern United States, we are getting temperatures down into the 30s at night. So you cannot feed, or should not feed, 1-to-1 sugar syrup anymore. And instead we've dropped to a 2-to-1 concentration of sugar to water. And also I put out medium supers that I pulled off way back in the spring. And I let the bees rob those out. And I'm going to explain my logic behind that in this video. And we're going to talk about some of the rationale behind whether or not it's a terrible thing to open feed. Is it a high-risk area? Is it something that would provide a congregation area where the bees would join up and share diseases and parasites? I'm going to share my logic behind why I open feed. Also, why I put out these robbing stations and put out supers like this of capped honey. What the benefits of that would be. And this is just my opinion. And remember, we're small-scale backyard beekeepers. This is not something, I'm not advising commercial keepers. But I'm going to give you a 3-minute break here to go and get your coffee and watch some slow-motion bees robbing out this medium super. And we're back. So I'm going to walk you through the bee yard and we're going to get an update here. That first box I just showed was occupied automatically. It was in storage. Bees just moved into it. These are some swarms that I collected sitting on a Bee Smart Design stand there. Then we have the Flow Hive 2. That has a swarm in it with my hive visors on, of course. This is also a Flow Hive, not the Flow Hive 2. That's the standard. It has a swarm in it. This box has a swarm in it, standard with a flat, solid bottom board, and it's a Bee Smart Design freestanding hive support also. And that has a deep box and a medium super on it. We tried to get a deep and a medium on as many of these as we can, but if they didn't produce enough to fill that deep brood box, there was no point in adding a medium super. So that first one there was the Saskatraz bees. This one was a swarm. These are Saskatraz bees that did extremely well in this Flow Hive 2 design. They produced more honey than any hive in my apiary. Here's another, that was a swarm capture that came out of a 150-year-old house. So those are feral bees in that one. This one here, these are bee weaver bees. They made it through winter last year, but they swarmed a couple of times this year, so we have new queens going into winter. These are also bee weaver bees, and that is a standard Flow Hive deep with a medium on top. And over here we have bee weaver on the right. That's what we pulled our pollen off of this year's strongest colony. And over here to the left we have Saskatraz bees looking strong again. Look at, they have a medium super on top. These hives are chock-a-block with honey. Now, here's also this open feeder. Look at this. The trough isn't even filling up because so many bees are piling up on where the syrup comes out that it never even gets a chance to fill the trough. So feeding your bees this time of year, what's that about, and is it a good idea? And why on earth would I save back full frames of honey and put a medium super out for the bees this time of year instead of just uncapping it, spinning it, and harvesting the honey? Well, I'll explain. What's really going on is winter in these parts of the United States seems to catch everybody off guard. So the bees have built up to take advantage of the resources that were, until very recently, in full bloom. The last were the Maximilians and the Asters, and the bees had a huge foraging force that can go several miles from the apiary. But now, guess what? There's nothing for them to bring in. And there are a few asters left, and that's about it. So, what would they normally do? They would turn their energy towards any resource they can find. And they would be robbing weaker colonies this time of year. So I can take the pressure off those smaller colonies, and some of the swarm captures that I just showed in their boxes. We can provide these foragers a diversion. So I put out capped honey. And in each of these medium frames, there's about 47 pounds of honey. What's the payout? Well, once they rip off the caps of that and they take honey back to their parent colony, guess how much processing has to be done? Almost none. We already know that it's capped. We know that the water percentage is well under 20%, and we know that it's ready to go immediately to storage. So they'll pass that on to the storekeeper bees inside, and those bees will fill the cells right away, and that's immediately available to the bees inside the colony on these cold nights. We're going to get snow very soon. If you're putting out sugar syrup, you're going to want to make that 2-to-1, as I already mentioned. Now, I like to look underneath of the robbing station here. I like to see who's foraging through the grass down here. I like to see what species are around. There's a yellow jacket queen. See the little dots on her abdomen? There is a brown paper wasp there, friend to the bee. There are bumblebees all over the place, but let's make no mistake about it. Who's in charge of this area? The honeybees. The wasps are not overwhelming the honeybees. The bumblebees just come in and they're huge, but the bees start biting their feet and pulling them out of the way. So most of the foraging bees, like the bumbles, are down here on the ground under this medium super. And that saves them having to fight with the bees. And what they do is they're picking up little bits of wax and propolis, and they're licking every little minute remnant of honey from each one. Look on the right there, there's a worker honeybee licking off of another bee. So sometimes they fall out of the robbing super, and have honey sticking on them, and they clean each other up. Even wasps will clean off bees. Look, there's a bumblebee, a wasp, and honeybees all in the same shot there. So for me, because I'm curious about every kind of bee, every kind of wasp, I want to see what's in the area. A feeding station gives me an opportunity to look at everything. Now, is this really such a huge risk when it comes to bees getting in close contact with one another? Some people say, well, a varroa is very agile, very fast moving. They could jump from one bee to another. All right, so let's talk about the options. This is my thinking. Why would a varroa leave the abdomen of a healthy bee? That's its host. It's providing for it. It is unlikely that a varroa is going to leave a healthy bee, a resource, a guaranteed survival resource, and jump on another bee and take a chance that it doesn't get groomed off. On the flip side, if the bees are not fed this time of year in this way, and they're left to go and rob out weaker, potentially sick colonies, what's the risk there? Now they're entering a colony that is in decline, that is unable to defend itself, that may have disease. So in my opinion, this is just, an opinion, it's a far greater risk for those bees to be entering a small, weak, potentially sick colony and robbing it out than it is to come here to my feeding station and get their resources from medium supers that I pulled off of healthy colonies and put out capped honey that I know the history of. And then by the time it gets really cold and the foraging ceases, I can stop putting these out. So I have several of them stored, and I put them out one at a time. I'm not going to put a stack of 3 medium supers out there. So let me know what you think. Is that flawed logic? Should you not open feed? Should you just let weaker colonies get robbed out? The environment has let them down. This is goldenrod, not so golden anymore. And the seeds are going to blow around. This is Joe Pye weed. It's kind of cool looking, but it's all texture now. There's no resources for the bees. And again, close-ups of goldenrod. There are birds that eat the seeds, and of course the wind will blow it around, and they'll replant themselves for next year. The few asters that are still in blossom now obviously have pollinators on them. And look, this one's even got pollen on her legs, so that's a honeybee. And there just isn't much going on. I walked quite a distance to find any of these blooms, and there's a yellow jacket also getting some nectar off of that. And just look at it. Winter's going to be here soon. Snow's going to fly. So my logic is to provide everything we can for the bees that we know is going to benefit them and that is not transferring some kind of disease to the bees. And that keeps them home and keeps them from foraging. The other thing is we want to keep sure that we are putting out water drinkers, and I keep the sea salts out. They're using the sea salt station. And of course here at the pond edge, they're in the sandy soil, and these are watering bees. By the way, the bees that fly out and collect water from resources like this, that's all they're doing. They are not going to be collecting nectar. They're not going to be collecting honey. They only collect water, so it's a specialty. And then those bees fly back, and they're going to paint their water over the surface of the brood frames, and they're going to keep them humidified, and they're going to cool the hive. And if there are bees inside the hive that can't get out because they're doing other duties, they're going to transfer their water to them. And so they're going to just deliver drinks. It's kind of like the water bees at a football game. They're going to make sure that the players stay in play, and they're going to come out there and bring the water to them so they can hydrate on the job. So they like the minerals here. This is a spring-fed 14-foot deep pond. So this is really good water resource for them. We are away from agriculture. There's no runoff going into this water, so we know it's good for them. And they also still go after pure water resources, so provide them with as many resources as you can. I do feed the sea salt water at 1 teaspoon per quart in the apiary. The other thing I caution you about is if you're going to open feed your bees, please do not put your feeders on top of beehives. Once that feeder is empty and all those robbers are coming to that station, they're going to go after the bees that occupy the hive that you put the feeder on. Here's another thing I noticed. Look at these 2 bees. The one on the left is a light tan. See the legs? See how golden it is? Someone once said that it's only the color of the bee's hair that's different, that all bees are black. Well, this kind of looks different. This is an amber-colored bee. I hope you enjoyed this video. Feed your bees this time of year if you want to prevent them from robbing one another out, and feed responsibly. Keep that feed away from your hives.